Welcome, 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 everybody. I'm so happy you're here. This is a series that Spencer and I have created on working with Tritypes. And the most significant thing we're trying to add is how to understand the dynamics. So we're not going to go through all the possibilities because there are well over 700 combinations. But at the end, we will have Q&A, and if you want to ask about a particular dynamic, we will address it. Both Spencer and I work with the Enneagram every day with our clients, and we have a bunch of questions. Some I've been asked before, but Spencer may have a different take on them. So we'll begin with those questions, but go ahead and open, Spencer.
Hi, I'm Spencer. For those who don't know, that's my mom, assuming that my finger is pointing at the correct camera on your guys' screen. Otherwise, it's some random person.
Kim is not your mom.
Okay, so it's all messed up. So to some of you, I have a random mom. There you go. But I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I utilize this in my work, as she says, every single day. I feel like it allows the work that we're doing to get there so much faster. And I also find that it helps me identify words that people are searching for when they're trying to express themselves, because Enneagram types tend to use similar wording to describe certain dilemmas that they're in and feelings that they're having and so forth and so on. So I've been doing this like literally my whole life. My mom was getting into the Enneagram when she was pregnant with me. So I don't know any other world without it. It's always been this thing. I was always overtyping my friends and trying to make them whatever number I was. And so I learned over time that probably it was better that they weren't all 8s, because that would have been quite a thing. So, but yeah, I've been doing this for years and just got more and more serious with it. And I even used it in my thesis. And so I think it's a game changer.
And actually, you had enough confidence that you taught the types when you were 11, and then the instinctual types with Daniel when you were 16, I believe, right?
That's right. I forgot all about that. And then funny enough, when I was in grad school, they happened to talk about different personality types. And when they mentioned the Enneagram, a lot of fellow classmates knew I was going to be doing my thesis on that. So they were joking, saying I should go to the front of the class and start teaching about it. And I just decided to take them seriously and walked to the front of the class and actually did it. And the professor let me. So I did an impromptu little course for like 10 minutes, like nothing crazy. So yeah, that was really fun too.
Yeah. He was adorable when I'd be teaching a weekend class, and he was with me that weekend. So he would come too, and he'd tell everyone in the class everything about their type and their tritype. And from the time he was really young, like 9, maybe even younger. So he could tell you most anything. And really, because he has different experience, and even though we're both sexual 8s, we're still different in our life experiences and how we've worked with people. Yeah. So we might phrase things a little differently. We are a different tritype, and you'll see it that way. And our MBTI is a little different, and you'll see the thinking versus the feeling with Spencer as an ENFP. His illustrators are even bigger than mine, but we'll go from there. So go ahead, Spence. Anything else you want to say before you read the quick definition, and I can add what's important to that?
Not like as like an about me thing. No, I mean, if there's a certain thing that people tend to want to know, I'm happy to answer it, but I can't really think of anything at the moment.
Yeah. And so the last thing before you begin would be, if you don't know me, I've been working with typologies since I was a senior in high school, which was a long time ago. And I have really had an incredible experience of certifying with the early authors, and then also spending an intensive with Claudio Naranjo and with Oscar Chazo, and then another really amazing thing is that Naranjo validated my research on the instinctual types and subtypes. He was happy and delighted because he hadn't been given credit for that work. But my research led to him. All roads led back to Claudio Naranjo. And then I spent a year on the island of Maui, which is where Echazo was headquartered, and the Eureka School, and became good friends with Mark Sheehan. And I just recently posted an interview with Mark, and he died in September. So it was really great that I got his experience with Eureka, and as someone who then taught the Eureka process, Echazo's work, the 40-day training, and other courses. And it was that year where I really learned even more about Echazo's work from someone that was teaching his work. And I'm so grateful for that. But that video is up. And then our part 2 with Tritypes is up. Just both have been posted in the last week or two. All right.
Awesome. So a quick little rundown of Tritype. So Tritype refers to a 27-point typing system that is an advanced and more specific application of the Enneagram that was created and coined by Enneagram teacher, researcher, and coach, Katherine Fauvre. Tritype was originally named like 3 types, trigrams, and tricenter, and is based on Katherine's theory that while individuals' primary use of Enneagram type is their core type, everyone's actually uses 3 Enneagram types, the dominant Enneagram type within each center of intelligence. So we got the head type, the heart type, and the gut types, which are 5, 6, 7 for head, 2, 3, 4 for heart, and 8, 9, 1 for gut. These 3 types are used in a specific oscillating, repeating, and hierarchical stacking order that merge to create a more specific focus of attention. In addition to using one dominant Enneagram type within the tritype, the 3 types within each tritype combine to create a new type unto itself, which is one's tritype archetype is what we would call that. The dominant type of those 3 types in your tritype would still be your core Enneagram type.
Yeah, so thank you, Spencer. You're not losing anything, you're gaining more subtlety.
Yeah.
And over the years, I discovered more and more and more working with people every day, and these studies that have been ongoing for the last 37 years, really, one way or another. And I also ran studies prior to discovering the Enneagram on lexicon and what people would say for the purposes of a quick interview, so that I could determine right away if someone was suited for the job that I was hiring people for. And it translated perfectly to being a good tool with the Enneagram. And at the beginning of the test, the Enneagram Tritype test, I ask you those questions that I used so many years ago. And at different times, depending on my position, I had people under me in different tiers where I might be interfacing with as many as 1,000 people at different times, because I went all over the country. And it just proved to be true. So once I learned the Enneagram, it was, wow, I know those clusters. Yep, they were all the same. I didn't know what to call them. And now with the Enneagram and the instinctual types, subtypes, tritypes, I knew what to call them. It just consolidated. And I knew Myers-Briggs, and I knew so many typologies that had to do with body language and attitude and then micro expressions. So they're just all coming together. So you may notice when Spencer and I answer questions, we may propose a different type than you'd be thinking of, if you're asking about your relationship with someone else. And the reason for that is over these years and all these different trainings, I learned what was lost in the dissemination of the Enneagram, as well as what people just didn't know. And each school knew their own work, but they didn't intimately know the work of one another. So they wouldn't have noticed that a particular archetype was dropped out. Now, where that happened the most was with type 6, type 9, type 2, and type 8. And that's why I did this series, Are You or Someone You Know Mistyped? Because it became so clear that if you didn't know a particular factor of a type and you were going just with behavior, it'd be so easy to identify with a type that you weren't actually using in terms of a defense strategy. So Spencer and I talked about this right before we began, and I wanted to be sure to stress that to be a particular type or have that type in your tritype, you need to have the idealized self-images of that type and their core fears. But really of greater importance is you must actually use that defense strategy. So a lot of times when I'm working with people, they can seem like, especially an ESTJ, will seem like an 8 no matter what, even if they aren't an 8. And an INFP will seem like a 4, even if they're not a 4. So you have to look beyond that, because we're using the same descriptors. And we have a pretty broad vocabulary because we're a country of many cultures. But nonetheless, ultimately, there's only so many of them. And we might use the word artisan. Like in archetypes, I was teaching about artisans when I was in the cosmetic industry, the different ways we would look and how you would do their makeup or the kind of clothing that they would look best in. So all of that could vary, because the description of an artisan in another system will have overlapping qualities, but they may not be the same thing. So it's always good to know how it's meant and defined. And we will do that as we go through. But don't be surprised. I always tell people that I may suggest something different or a different order for you, but I'm actually observing whether or not you're using that defense strategy when you're talking about your type. And if you aren't, then I'm going to pay attention to the strategy you are using. And we can have two types really close. Like Spencer has the 6 and the 7 very close. And what's fascinating in a more advanced level is that the 8, in essence, has the 2 wings of 7 and 9. So that amplifies the 7. And 6 has the wings of 5 and 7. So you can have a pretty strong influence of a particular type without it actually being your lead tritype. Now, maybe next time we'll go into some more advanced understanding of this, but we use all tritypes, just like we use all Enneagram types. But how quickly do we get there? And I found for most people, there are 4 to 6 tritypes that we use regularly. But just as with our primary type, we're going to lead with one more than another. The first question, I'll let Spencer answer this first, is can your tritype change over time?
That is a question I get a lot. As much as it may feel like that, the answer is no. So tritype, the thing to remember is not what you do, it's why you do it. What's driving you to do it? What leads your desires? What motivates you? What's important to you? What do you fear? Right? These stay true throughout our life. However, as we grow and evolve, or maybe we go through something really difficult and we devolve, our behaviors will adapt. Our behaviors will change. We'll come up with maybe more socially acceptable or age-appropriate patterns to get our needs met. But if I don't know about all of you, but if I look back, the same things that were important to me still are. Maybe they've embodied something new, right? I really, really needed to have that toy. And now as I get older, there's this new really, really need that I have. And it's very connected to how I'm the most emotionally reactive Tritype that there is. So I get really impassioned by things that I connect to. So the thing changes, but my impulse does not. My behavior that I do once I feel the impulse hopefully changes from very young age as I get older, but the inside does not. And that's why the Tritype does not change, but our behaviors and patterns very often do. And oftentimes we type ourselves and others based on behaviors. It's a very common thing. It happens all the time. And that's why people can get a little confused.
It's very normal because the Enneagram is the only personality typology based on motivation and defense strategy, as opposed to behavior and process style. So if you can just realize that and how they modify each other, it's huge. Okay, next question. I took your Enneagram Tritype test version 8, which has been around a while now. I do change content periodically, but the physical structure of the test has not changed. Now, when I add the additional special notices that you can receive, we may have to do a version 9, depending on how extensive the change is. But content-wise, if you took the test earlier, like in 2020, it automatically updates your 2020 test, not just a recent test. So how the cards were improved, because I keep improving things. So then this person's saying that he was very surprised at how revealing it was and tested as a social 469, but he did receive 7 of the special notices, and he wanted to know what that meant. Now, when I originally had the test programmed to identify the patterns that only 6s and 9s use, occasionally some 3s, but they have 6 and 9 in the Tritype. But what happened was that I put a little paragraph there, but people didn't even see it. So no matter what you have in your top blue banner is how you saw yourself and ultimately the cards you chose. But the little asterisks, the special notices, are really important. Initially, I had it programmed so if you met any of the criteria, you were given a notification. But some people could get 25 of them, and then it would just be pages of special notices, and they didn't get to their possible Tritype. So then I thought, no, 1 is enough. You don't need to do it for every single one. But when I only had a program where 1 showed up, people didn't give it any significance. So then I went back to remembering what stands out for people. And it's a pattern of 7. So 3 could still be important, not important. And of course, 25, you invalidate it because it's just too many. But 7, you'll think, oh, wait, maybe there is something that I can learn here. So even if you had 25, it's going to stop at 7. So in this case, he said, does that mean I'm really a 649? Because I always thought I was a 6. Yes. So it just means that he liked the 4 cards. And when it came down to his final choices, he put the 4 above the 6. But he was right. He is the 6. People don't have a false positive with type 6. The false positives are type 8, type 7, And it used to be type 2, not as much anymore, but for sure type 4. So if you have a strong tritype, but I happen to mention you might really be leading with the 6 or 9, what's important to understand about that is that the primary types of 3, 6, and 9 become invisible because they're meant to be balanced, both wings, especially if you have the 3, 6, 9 tritype. You're just going to choose the type you identify with, and that may or may not be your type. And as I mentioned, you could have the INFP and not lead with 4, but you'll be a creative, individualistic version of your lead type, regardless. So he's right. And I guess I should have explained more about what that meant. So pay attention to those special notices. They just cannot show up unless you have used patterns that the other types don't use. So they're very meaningful. The only exception is with the type 2. The type 2 will book a session with me if they have the 2, 6, 9 tritype, because they won't be certain that they have the right type, because they will have received asterisks because of their 6 and 9. So with them, I'm just affirming that they are, in fact, leading with the 2. But the 2, 6, 9 tritype is very, very similar to one another. And it makes it harder to know your lead type. But if you have 6, and let's say both 6 and 9, you're going to identify with the strongest type in your tritype. And if you just have the 9, you'll usually choose 8 or 1. And if you have the 6, you'll choose 5 or 7. But what you can see and observe in your pattern is that when I gave you the Enneaspreads, which is a tab when you get your test results, Enneaspreads has everything that you chose and then ranked and stacked the highest of each pattern of 3. So I like it because it's a quick way to see everything that you did. But if you want to know exactly what you chose when, then you go to the tab called Show Answers. So with that, if you notice, like in the top 6-card spread, that there are 2 6 cards, you're 6 even if you don't think you are. To even have 1 6 card is alerting you that it could be in your tritype, and it usually is. But if you have 5, 6, and 7 in the top, it's still pointing to type 6. Why is that? Because the 6 is the type that's connected to both their wings of 5 and 7. So usually people will relate to a different one. But if you know 6 is in your tritype, you're way ahead of the game for most 6s. And it's not that 6s are not as aware. It's just that they're hyper aware of behaviors and possibilities. And so they're not aware that they are making their projected ideas based on people's behavior and what they project could go wrong. Now, sometimes people ask me, well, aren't 6s with a 7 wing positive and seeing positive projections? Well, of course, but 5, 6, and 7 are all dealing with their fear and their potential for chaos with the negative things that can go wrong. So the 5 is just overly preparing and needs to know everything, so they're not dependent on anyone. So they're totally self-sufficient. And the 7 is trying to know a little bit about everything so they can at least converse on any topic. But the 7 is saying, yeah, I want to project a positive future to deal with this negative possibility. And the 6 is noticing the positive possibilities, but they're concerned about the negative possibilities. So 5, 6, and 7 are all focused on what can go wrong. They're just managing it a different way. And remember that it's based on their projection. So we talk about the defense strategy of 6 being projection because they project the most and they use it as their lead defense strategy. So they're in the center that projects, and then they project to make sure they're not caught off guard. And that's why they don't see their type. Okay, I think we answered this, but if you want to add anything, Spencer, the next question is, do only 6s have special patterns when taking your Enneagram test? What have you noticed with people?
I mean, I definitely see 6 and 9 the most. And I agree, I've seen it with 3s, but almost every single time they've been some sort of 3, 6, 9 combo. And whenever it's a 3, 6, 9 combo, they tend to specifically feel like, man, that test was really hard because it was like really like asking all these kinds of things. But I haven't really, I've seen 7 be misidentified quite a bit, but those are 6s like almost every single time. So I haven't really seen a notable pattern with other numbers. So that's what I've found the most.
And then if you're a coach or a therapist or you're a business consultant and you're using this tool, you want to go to the show answers and see the adjectives that they use. Now, in a session, you can get their definition of their adjectives. But like if they use the adjectives that are most common for the 6 or the 9, but they think they're another type, it'll be incongruent. And when they go to define their adjective, like open-minded, in the teachings of the Enneagram, the 9 is the most open, then the 7. But actually, it depends on their MBTI and it depends on their definition of open-minded. Okay, here's a good one. I have learned a lot about the history of the Enneagram, but I didn't know about the current transmissions of the Enneagram. What is the Enneagram and personality, and how is it different from the earlier Enneagram? It's very important. Like all my research, all my definitions are based on the Enneagram of personality. And that is Oscar Chazo's work, where he used the same Enneagram symbol, but he gave actual personalities to all 9 types. Now, Enneagram just means 9-pointed graph. And if you go back or you Google Enneagram, an image might come up with Ramon Lully's work, Lull. And he has the divine states, all 9 of them. And he has every type connected to every other type. And it was in 1325 that he first came up with this Enneagram. So is it the first Enneagram, or was the Pythagorean Enneagram symbol there first? It's pretty darn close. Would hypothesize probably Pythagoras. But if you know about Gurdjieff's work or the 4th way, there are important differences. Same symbol, same movement between the lines, but the descriptions are really critical. And it was Naranjo and Chazo, more specifically created by Chazo, but many of the subtleties were added by Claudio Naranjo. So together, they created a much more personality-oriented system that let you know what was in the way of doing deeper work. And that's what you need to see. Is it that fear of being caught off guard like a 6, or being manipulated, or being trapped or limited? If you just think of all the possibilities, it will govern how receptive we are to information or teaching. So we have to be able to self-observe. And I always enjoyed the 360 testing instrument in businesses, because you got a well-rounded picture of an individual, because the managers would have weighed in on it, the coworkers would have weighed in on each person, and what the person thinks of themselves. So if there's a huge discrepancy, that's an area where you can communicate more, whether it's a manager that needs to learn about their direct reports, or coworkers need to understand about the way their manager is going to see themselves and see you. It's really critical. So when I receive feedback as a manager from my managers, if they were like me, they thought I was great because it was the same. If they were the opposite Tritype, meaning in my case, that would be a 1-3-6, because those are the types I get to last in each center. And it's the Tritype that's a wonderful complement to mine that fills in the details, but the opposite from me. And they would give me feedback that I needed to slow down, that I needed to be more cooperative. And when I'd say, well, wait a minute, I'm doing what you want, I wouldn't be doing it this way. So isn't that cooperating? And then they'd say, well, yeah, I guess so, if you're doing it my way, but you really think there's a better way. And I had one boss when I was like 18 that said, well, let's do an experiment. You do it your way for the next month, and then we can decide if my way is better or your way is better, or maybe it'll be a mix. And I thought, fair enough. And sure enough, she said, no, do it your way, because you get it done faster and better your way, but still follow the procedures that I value, which was the 1. But she was a very progressive one that had 7 in the Tritype and 2. So she wasn't the rigid one. She was just trying to teach me the best way to do things, but she was not going to fight with success either. As long as I was following the policies and procedures that she was going to be judged on as a manager, she was fine with me doing it my way. Some types can't do that. The type that has the most trouble is the rigid 6, because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble with someone. So they really expect a lot of their coworkers or the people that report to them. Okay, Spencer, the question was, I have always identified with type 2, but most of the descriptions of type 2 seem too passive. I think I might have the 268 Tritype. Could my Tritype be the reason that I don't relate to the passive description of type 2? It's an excellent question.
It's a great question. And that is also a multifaceted answer.
Yes.
2s can have, there's already a line of connection to 8. So there's that already. 2s are direct in their own way. So they come off as passive maybe to others, but they really try to maneuver things to still get their needs met. Maybe they're not directly being like, do this for me, but they'll subtly bring it up repeatedly. They'll address it, gently mention it, like, oh, okay, so you're going to do that before, blah, blah, blah. Okay, like they'll plant hints. They are direct communicators. They're just not aggressive about it. And the thing is 2s can get feisty. People don't really talk about that a lot, but 2s can absolutely get feisty, especially when wounded, because it's like, I have been nice. I have been self-sacrificing. I have been this, I have been that. That's it. my needs are not being met. And then they can actually get much more direct, especially if they have 8 in the Tritype. Because I always say, like, if 8's not like the leading number in the Tritype, the 8's like the bouncer at the door that's kind of like regulating whether things are fair, and it kind of comes in and we'll be like, okay, this is no more. And when that combines, it can be a very direct. Sometimes, 2 combined with other numbers can come off much more passive, but even still, there's not a single 2 that I've ever met that doesn't maneuver to get their needs met. And they get confused because a lot of times it gets reflected back to them that they're pressers. They press. And the 2 won't identify with that. So because they see pressing as something different, and they're not connecting that they are subtly bringing it up at a higher rate, as opposed to bringing it up less often, but much more directly. So
you're making such a good point, Spencer, and you might want to add on to this, but I'm partially responsible for people misunderstanding the passive aspect to types. But you see, as human beings, we're either directly aggressive or passive aggressive, but we're going to have our needs met. And if we don't have them met, we're going to complain about it to the person that's not meeting it or to other people. It's not going to go silent, or we're just going to leave and go do what we want to do. So I probably am responsible because I only put up kind of the positive description. I didn't go in depth with each Tritype online. And even then, passive does not mean soft. It means you're going to give way. But the experience I've had with 2s is they'll say, oh, you know me, I do whatever you want to do. But are you sure you want to do that? It's usually a 269 because it's triple wanting to meet my needs and help me and do extra things, but they're absolutely convinced, this is all 269s, that they're easygoing and doing what the other person wants. But what they may not recognize till they learn about the Enneagram is they are navigating so that the outcome is what they want. Now, ultimately, they will defer to the person in charge, but they will be asking many times, wait, are you sure you want to do that? And that's just my clue that something bothers them. And then I ask them, well, what is it that's bothering you? Because it could be a really good point that I haven't thought of because I'm so direct. So just know that the 6, the 2, and the 9 are going to create a Tritype that appears passive, but they're very strong people, very strong. And as Spencer said, if they have 8 in the Tritype, then they're going to really be quite adept at getting the outcome that they want through those hints. And they are hints, but they're repeated. They're absolutely repeated. And they are the most naturally generous that will take that extra step to meet the need that they see in front of them. And they're kind. They're all focused on being kind people. And what else have you noticed, like in couples dynamics? Anything come to mind with the 269 and the other Tritypes?
Man, the two's observation skills, the ability to, and I'm talking like side eye stuff that they catch. The two's ability to recognize that you cut like crust off your sandwiches, and then later on when they ask you to, if they, not that they would necessarily like ask you to make them a sandwich, because that might be something that they're still working through. But say you make them a sandwich and then you cut off the crust. A 2 is going to love that the person looks at the sandwich and goes, wait, you know that I cut the crust off? Because the favorite thing that I've picked up with people that have 2 in their Tritype is, yeah, you didn't even have to tell me. I watch you, I see you. Like I see you.
Absolutely.
And I've noticed that that's a big love language, because for the 2, that's what they want also. They want to truly be seen, truly understood. And they just want to feel validated. And it really upsets them when they have to make that so clear, because they do feel like they've dropped hints and maybe even done it directly, but they don't want to make a big show out of it or make a big problem out of it. So it's not like they will maybe press as hard at first if the person's not understanding. So I've really noticed that that's kind of my belief as to why that's so hurtful, because it's like, man, I'm thinking about you when you're not around. I am like strategizing to make sure you feel cared about. And like, I even got this little thing that proved I was thinking about you. It wasn't even your birthday, like blah, 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 blah. And then the person will, like, I don't know, not remember something that's very symbolic for the 2. Because that's the thing about 2 is there's a meaning behind why I'm paying attention to this. And so there's something more than just whatever the fight's about. There's a symbolism about, I don't know, their worth, their value, right? And so their ability to see is a superpower. And
Yeah.
like, I like to think that I see stuff really well with like 4 in my Tritype, 6 in my Tritype, all that kind of stuff. But 2s, man, they're really paying attention and like a whole nother level.
And you really address something so critical, and that is the worth or the value. So for all heart types, you're trying to get the feedback that you have value. But in the case of the 2, it's, do you have worth? And the fear is that you're worthless, that you're not useful, you're unneeded. So anything that communicates in their evaluation of circumstances that they aren't appreciated for what they do brings up that terror that they're dispensable. Whereas other types maybe don't think they're dispensable. They don't worry about it one way or another. But all of us have a fear of not being valued in our important relationships. But with the 2, it's at a whole nother level. They feel like they have to earn the right to be given to. And then other types might think, and they could also be a 2, no, I do so much, I should be given to. I've earned that. I'm entitled to that. But when there's no discussion of it, there can be misunderstandings. Whereas once the Enneagram comes into play, it's very easy to work with different Tritypes and help them understand that when the 2 is saying, wait, I need you to meet my needs, they're really saying like, pick me, me first. It's not like, pick me. Now, I have met people that are not reflective in any way. They don't know the Enneagram or any other typology, and they may be that way, especially if they're the 2, 7, 8. They don't want to wait for anything. They don't want anyone to interfere with where they're headed and what they're going after. So it's very different than the 2, 6, 9, but they're both 2s. So you have to see the defense strategy. And what is the defense strategy? Not directly telling people what you need. In fact, the defense strategy is repression, which is to conceal your neediness. So then the other person doesn't realize what you need or want. So it's creating a safe space for the 2 and whomever they're in relationship with to discuss that. Like, what might your needs be? And they just want people to know. And a lot of times the 2, depending on the Tritype, will say, well, you should know. I know what you need. And then what they can learn is they may know what they think you should need, but it may not be what you actually need. And they're just like attentive to everything that you're doing, because their happiness comes from being aligned with the person they've chosen to attend to. And that's another thing people don't understand about twos, is they try to be likable to everyone. And if there's a difficult person, they'll try harder to get that person to smile or respond to them. Now, 2 and 6 in particular are the hysterical types, so they need a response from you. They need to know that you see them, care about them, and want to meet their needs just the way they want to meet your needs. And once you understand what those needs actually are, the 2 will back off on their idea that they know you better than you know yourself. And in some ways they do, but in other ways they might not know what's more important to you in terms of possibilities. So yes, great description, Spencer. So very true.
I can just add one last. This comes up a lot in my sessions. The good person dilemma.
Yes.
I find that this is too vague of a definition, and a lot of times good person falls under the category of not pushing your needs. And it's too loose of a description, and you can ask them to identify other good people around them, and there's multiple representations of it. But typically someone with 2 in their tritype, especially the higher up it is on the totem pole, will struggle to see that they can be both a good person and show resistance to what someone's doing that doesn't feel good or isn't meeting their needs or whatever, because it doesn't feel like what a good person would do. It's understanding that you can set boundaries in a compassionate and validating and understanding way and still fight for your own. And 2s usually feel like they have to choose between other and self. And since they care so much about other, they tend to prioritize other, not realizing you can actually do both at the exact same time. It doesn't feel like they can occupy the same space. And with my couples, that comes up literally I can't think of a single one I'm working with or have worked with where that hasn't come up. Like, you can both get your needs met. It's just maybe just using a different type of strategy. So
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing about good, people say, oh, the type that wants to be the good person is the 1. The 1 needs to be right, and being a good person is the right thing to be. But they need to do the right thing in every situation, and they're more logical than the 2s. 2s are reading the emotional need. But the 2 needs to be the good person, all around good person. And the 6 needs to be the boy or girl, man or woman next door that's likable, the good neighbor.
The buddy, yeah.
Yep. And the 9 wants to be the pleasant person. So if you have that tritype, you're going to definitely care. But if you have 1 in the tritype, so it's 1, 2, 6 instead of 2, 6, 9, just the gut type is different. The irony is the 2, 6, 9 is the most inclined to see the other's need, whereas the 2, 6, 1, on the other hand, is the most militant tritype of the 27. And what was lost in the dissemination of the Enneagram is the militant nature of type 2. And that's why so many 2s mistype as 8s. And if we think about someone like Napoleon, he would be the 2, not the 8. But most people say, oh yeah, he had to have been an 8. But actually, if you dive a little deeper into what mattered to him, his image really mattered. And he had 2 and 8 in the tritype, so it's understandable. As best we can tell, he led with 2, not 8. Whereas if we look at Mussolini, people say, well, he was an 8. Actually, I think he was counterphobic 6. fear was driving his focus. And yet he had 8 in the Tritype. So if someone's a 6 in the Tritype, they're going to go with their strongest type, is what they're going to think they are. So each Enneagram type has 9 different possible Tritypes. So there's many ways to look at Tritype. So if you look at the 2, since that's the primary theme so far, the 2, 7, 8, the most self-referenced of the 2s. They're not as other referenced as the 2, 6, 9. The 2, 5, 9 is quieter. They're going to help you, but it'll be really quiet. Like this one person at one corporation that I went to regularly knew I liked bottled water because a pitcher of water I could knock over. I could get my computer wet or my papers wet because I might be illustrating too big and accidentally knock it over, especially since it was clear. So I'd have to have it out of my reach. So she noticed I'd just go get bottled water. And that's because if I have a top on here, even if I knock it over, I'm not going to damage anything. And that's more the impulsivity of type 8. You kind of don't know where you are in time and space. You could be this much off of everything and just bump into things. So understanding that was very noteworthy to me because she was very introverted, very quiet, and she was an ISTJ with a 2, 5, 9. But she noticed how I liked the lights, when I wanted them turned up, turned down. I didn't have to specify all that for her because the 2, 5, 9 is tracking every detail. And they're the problem solver. And people think, oh, they're passive because of the 5 and the 2 and the 9. Well, they're not going to overtly, energetically be pushing against, but they're not missing a thing. And it's really instructive because they don't have to be told several times what's important because the 2's already tracking what will give them value. Okay, next question. Your approach seems, oh, I love your work. Your approach seems to lead to deeper aspects of the types. Yeah, that's because of all the different ways I've learned about the types. But the question was, what are you seeing when you ask the in-depth inquiry questions of the panelists? That is a common question. What people don't realize is that because of my training on microexpressions, which is, gosh, since 1976, even though I knew body language before that, but by 1976, I knew Paul Ekman's work, which I think is fantastic. And I might ask the panelist a question, and then their expressions will show what they're really feeling. This is true in a session as well. And if someone is showing an emotion that's incongruent with what they're saying, I'm going to follow that inquiry. So what you may notice on all the panels of my 9 series of types, doing all 9 types, is that I've made sure the people on the panel are actually that Enneagram type. Because some of the other panels, they might have been doing an open teaching and just said, okay, well, the 3s that are willing to join in come up. And the first one that takes the seat represents the 3s. And I know that because I teach at conferences and what have you. But if that person is not the type they think they are, then I have to navigate to the right information when they've said something the type doesn't say. And I would say, oh, well, you know what? Actually, threes usually describe the answer to this question in this way, so that it at least gets out there. But on the other panels that are available, there are people that are clearly sixes and nines on the 8 panel or the 3 panel. It's really noteworthy because a client will say to me, I'm exactly that like that person on the 8 panel. And I say, show me which 8 panel. And then I could say, of course you relate to this person. They're not an 8. They're the same type you are. You're going to relate. So just know that if you're following someone's emotions, you're seeing what's really going on, even if they're telling you something different. And they don't know they're doing it, by the way, the types. They don't know when they're giving away their Enneagram type or using the vocabulary of a particular type, because they haven't worked with tens of thousands of people like I have, where even more, if you consider my work before the Enneagram, I already knew those clusters. So I'm alerted when they're incongruent. Like if someone says, I have a fear of not being needed, it's usually a 2 or a social type. If they say that they're an 8, but then one of the questions is, what do you need? And they say to be confident. Well, an 8 never says that because they're just naturally too confident. Whereas the 6 or some 9s might say that. In fact, many 6s will say that. So the word confidence with the question that it's used with is key. The other thing is like a hallmark of the social 6 is when you ask them what they avoid, they'll say dangerous situations, dangerous people, doing something that's dangerous, or someone or something that's suspicious, or manipulating. So all the things that the 6 is aware of. So even if they chose strong words or adjectives because they have a strong tritype or MBTI type, you've got to see all of it. And what you will see with the 6s is the ability to use their eyebrows. And the primary way that a 6 communicates is through here. So the forehead is going up and down. If they're thinking, really? No. Are you sure? And it's all happening so fast that it's a hallmark of type 6.
Mm-hmm.
So if people tell you you're expressive and they know what you're feeling, chances are you're a 6. And I just love it because Brandon's older brother was a 6, and I just knew from the time he was little as a social 6 by his expressions. He didn't even have to say anything. But they can be serious, they can be questioning. I can't quite do it, but I can only do one eyebrow. But they often can do both, not always.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a little movement here, like
left foot,
just here, it's inner knowing. It's different than what? I don't believe you. It's like just a little movement here. It's like, yeah, we know, don't we? Or everyone thinks that. And that's what 6s tell themselves. Well, I'm sure everybody worries about that. And I'll say, actually, no, they don't. But 6s do, even if they're unconscious of it, but their face will show that they worry about it. So you can't show a worried face and not be someone who worries. It's incongruent. Why is that? Because just like muscles that we might build here, because we've done it over and over and over again, and heavy lifting, we get better and better. Well, the same is true with facial muscles. So if we're always questioning or we use surprise a lot, then that's going to be really developed and you'll have more use. And if you had a life of a lot of tragedy and sadness, it doesn't mean you're a 4. It means you've had a life of sadness. But if the brow is shaped like this, so it seems like it's on the side here, it means you let your feelings go up, but you end on the sad note. And you'll see that a lot with people that are 9s or 6s, but in particular, the 9 to 6 will have that. Now, facial shape does matter. Archetype does matter. Like Spencer is the warrior archetype. He's the warrior priest, and I'm the priest artisan. So it does make a difference. But we both have broad faces that are chiseled. Okay, anything you want to add to that, Spencer, about what you've noticed with the inquiry process and the emotions that you see when you're working with people?
I mean, gosh, almost so much that I don't even know what to say. Because I agree. There are certain things that you see with certain numbers on their faces. So without trying to avoid going through every single number. So I think you summarized it really, really, really well. I mean, I'm married to a 631, so I see the 6 animations all the time, especially because I like to pop out from behind walls and surprise her sometimes. So I get the wide-eyed, stunned look all the time, and it's very satisfying. I enjoy it. She gets me back, and I'm reactive too. So it's a fun little game we play.
Yeah. But we're going to sense if we feel someone's being incongruent, even if we don't know that the expressions are letting us know that.
Mhm.
Now, the more typologies we know, we can understand it better, but it's happening all the time.
Yeah.
And once we have a formula for it, it's pretty extraordinary. And that's what I'm doing on the panels. And that's why the panelists will get to, in fact, they all got to the emotional nature of their respective type. And a lot of things were revealed on those panels that I know, but the average person doesn't know. And it hasn't been written about in a book because everything has been, okay, this is your passion. How do you do that passion? And that works if someone is that type, but if they've mistyped, they're going with the description they've read somewhere, or they really know the types and they're saying exactly what you should say. Whereas when you're following the emotions of someone, the superego cannot anticipate where I'm going to go. I'm just seeing something incongruent, and Spencer does the same. And then we're asking the next question based on what was displayed. But it's seamless, unless I say, time out. Okay, this is 6. Oh, that part of you is 4. And then quick symbolism. But it's really quickly leads to what's going on with you and how you feel about it. So much faster. So that's why I don't include the passion or the fixation or the conviction, because you can read about that and I can cover that in different events and courses. But the micro expressions and the body language with the gestures, that's another thing, is I can't see someone's hands on Zoom. In person I could, but if someone's tightening these muscles, which you can see, or this gesture, just a quick, it's a stress gesture. So usually they have their hand clenched as well. And it's a way to manage that feeling of uncertainty. So I'll ask people, can you feel your feet? What position are your feet in? Or do you have your hands open or closed? Now I can see the jaw and the neck. I always ask people to show me the next so I can catch that without interrupting them. So that's all we're doing. And it just enables all of us to open our minds when we know that these emotions are universal, but each Enneagram type uses some emotions more than others. We all use the primary emotions, every single Enneagram type. But 8s overuse disgust. So these muscles are developed right through here. And Chazo said the tension on the 8 is right here. And boy, is it. But if you think about it, if you're going, whatever, you can't pull a fast one on me. If it's off to one side, it's also contempt, because contempt is an asymmetrical feature, like a growl. But if it's like you smelled something bad, that's disgust. Surprise is this, and so on. And each Enneagram type, depending on their tritype, will overuse or have developed the muscles on some parts of their facial structure than others. Okay. This happens too. At first, I thought that maybe you didn't know enough about the Enneagram types and that you had mistyped people. But now I realize that it was the opposite. You knew more about the types than others. But how do I know what type people are leading with? What do you think is the best way to type people? I use all those. What formula do you use, Spencer, when you're working with people?
Gosh, I mean, I'm more of a wing it type of person. So I'll be honest, when I'm talking to someone, I just notice what floats to the surface the most. If you think of a latte, your primary number is actually the espresso, right? So it's the thing at the core of you. That's what makes this coffee, right? What makes it, a caffeinated drink is the milk. What makes it a latte is specifically the foam. So long story short, I'm probably getting away with myself with this analogy.
You can tell one of the jobs he had.
Yeah, that was one of my first serious jobs with Starbucks. It's seeing what activates them the most. What are they talking about the most? Because they're going to address all of it, and there's going to be a general picture that I get. Because whenever I'm looking at someone, I'm breaking it up into 3 sections instantly. I'm just being like, okay, of your heart types, what am I seeing? Of your gut types, what am I seeing? Of your head types, what am I seeing? So I try to identify those 3 numbers first without identifying a primary. And then from there, well, the one I probably distinguish first is most likely your primary, because it's the most obvious to see. It's the one you're talking about the most. It's the one that you're behaving like the most. There's certain gestures and statements that certain numbers will just do more than others. And that's pretty much how I do it. But I'll be honest, I've never been like a technique person. So like, it was more just me winging it and just getting like a feel, like I feel it. And I just see kind of what pops up the most.
And are you feeling that in the interview before you've had them take the test and give you that
Yes.
feedback?
Yes, I actually even start during the consult, because when I'm trying to figure out like, what do you hope to accomplish with me? That's a great question to see kind of what they're focused on the most, what matters to them the most. Right. If I'm talking to someone and they're focusing on other people and connecting with others, right, I'm going to focus on more connecting types like 2s and 9s and things like 6s and things like that. So, and then, as we go on and on and on, more of what they will reference, that's a big one. And then obviously when I see them in the first session, I get to see them and I get to see their mannerisms and their facial expressions. And then it just solidifies from there. But I try really hard not to type until they actually take the test, because I really try to not project my thinkings and feelings, because I don't know your inner world. I know your behaviors and what you're saying, but I don't know what's driving you to do or say that. So I try to remind myself that even though this has been literally my whole life, I never want to get to the point where I'm like, oh, you're this, right? And then not even see like what they think and kind of go from there.
And, people that are in Myers-Briggs types that are intuitive perceiving, that's the NP, tend to be open. And I know, like Spencer, I might say, oh, yeah, that's what a 5 says, or that's what a 3 says, or that's what a 2 says, because I'm going to let people know when they've used an adjective or chosen cards in a particular way, but I'm open all the way through. And sometimes I'm too open because at the end, people go back to what the test said, and they didn't really listen to the fact I was saying, you might identify with that, but these 5 adjectives with this fear and this need is another type than you think. So in the last month or so, I've been telling people more why my hypothesis is they're a certain type. And if they have 6 in the Tritype, they need more time, because first they have to orient to the fact that they didn't understand 6 because it wasn't out there. So we have to add in the data we didn't have. And I didn't have all that data at first either. So pregnant with Spencer, 1985, but I didn't really run formally the first research till 1994. And that was after attending the Stanford conference, which was the first conference on the Enneagram. It was before the IEA. In fact, the IEA was formed as a result of that event, which is the International Enneagram Association. But what was so rich for me is that there were people from all over the Enneagram world. Some people were coming from out of the country, and they all had studied with different teachers. And I thought, wow, this is great. Some people know the subtypes, some people don't. Some people think wings are important, other people don't. Let me see what that means and how they would answer the questionnaire. And then from there, I would see people that use the same words that didn't know each other, had gone through different trainings with different teachers. And then I did interviews when there was a pattern that they couldn't possibly know this because it wasn't in a book. It was not available anywhere. It became of great interest to me, and it still is. So whenever I see a pattern again, because I look at the tests every day. Now, there are too many for me to go through all of them in depth every day now, but I will scan a few hundred at a time because I know the words that are used. I know like what their banner says and the things that create a certain ambiance, because at one point, a number of years ago, which is a lot now, but it seemed like just yesterday, but about 15, 18 maybe years ago, I took all the people that had taken my free test online, which was the original Enneacards test, and their Enneastyle questions and what it said they were based on how they chose those cards and what was actually more their type. And I used the vocabulary to create a plus and minus system. So if someone said anywhere on the questionnaire, vulgar, that was a +5 for a 4. They're the only person that says they avoid vulgar people because it's very descriptive and it creates a whole image of a person. Whereas the other types don't use that, just like the fear of dangerous people. And if you name who's dangerous, that's even more social 6. And with the 1, it's when there's a should anywhere on their questionnaire. And 6s, if they have 1 and 6, they definitely can be more rule oriented. And some are very rule bound. And if they're social, even more. So all these things are important together. Okay, this is another good one, Spencer, because we both do this. Question was, years ago, I attended an Enneagram course taught by you. It was made up of 3 families. My husband, daughter, and I all attended because we did not know how to communicate with each other. It was a teenage daughter and son, actually, but this question was focused on the daughter. And learning about the Enneagram, we became close for the first time. She just wasn't like her father and her brother. But now we're close. Are you still working with families as well as businesses and individuals? Absolutely. In systems theory, yes, you can try and help the individual, like the daughter, but if the parents don't understand the daughter or their Enneagram type or what's going on, there's only so much you can do. You can create empathy, but we have to define the family members. And I did actually do a lot of trainings that would be with families where they wanted to learn more about the Enneagram, and a couple, 3 families would get together. So it'd be like a full class. And I would notice really specific things. Like one was a 7 mother saying, oh, my kids never got sick. I never had to worry about that. And her children were a 5 and a 6. And they go, no, Mom, we were sick. You just didn't want us to miss out on Disneyland. So we went to Disneyland with a fever and we just wanted to be home in bed. But the intent of the 7 mother was to not have her children disappointed they didn't get to go to Disneyland. So the reframe was, my kids weren't 6. So that's great when you think in terms of the family perception. Spencer, how about you with systems theory and with working with parents and children?
Oh, I think it's, I absolutely think it's like a top-down system that I think is incredibly, incredibly important, especially if I'm working with someone under 18, but even still, because I think it's so multifaceted. I mean, I even think, man, it depends on even how deep you want to go with this, but like you have these 2 parents that are these tritypes that are trying to raise these tritypes. And granted, these kids can have these tritypes that come with these value systems. But if you're raised with like certain value systems, like beat in India, because it's been repeated so many times, you can end up taking on some of that and have it be important to you because it should be or whatever. It makes a very multifaceted thing that, of course, with systems theory, a lot of the healing work I do with my clients is perspective taking. Like once we can get a better understanding of what the parents' tritypes are or were if they're not around anymore, we can focus on maybe, you know, granted it's the person's perspective of their parents' tritype in these scenarios. But we can kind of reframe it and recognize like, oh, they were trying to take care of me and blah, 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 when they were the one there's certain numbers I run into a lot, but like 3 parents obviously, and then 1 parents get misunderstood a lot because, you know, 1 parents are really trying to guide you to the right thing. They put a lot of work in finding the right way to do this, and they want you to, you know, do well and you know, and be seen well. And a lot of times that can be seen as a critical parent when they're just trying to really guide and help. Like if you were to check into the heart of a 1, that's really what they're trying to do. 3 is trying to
improve, help you improve. Yeah. And
big
not make that mistake again.
On improvement. Yeah. Yeah. So I think systems theories plays such a huge role, because then you can be like, oh no, they were just doing it their way. And because of my lens, because of my tritype, I internalize that this way and that way. Because remember, you're born at least I'm under the belief that you're born your tritype. So that's why you internalize the way you do. A lot of people think that maybe your primary you're born and secondary and tertiary are conditioned into you or whatever the case may be. Man, I used to work with little kids and I'm like, you're a this. And it's like, they're very young and you can tell. And so we internalize based on what our fears are, what we're worried is true, what we're worried people think of us or the message they're sending us or whatever the case may be. So also understanding, not to invalidate, like, oh, you just took it this way, but like understanding how that can get lost in translation, what was intended and how it was internalized. Those don't typically go hand in hand like people think it does.
And you know what I would add to that, Spencer, is when the Enneagram of Personality was created by Echazo, he began his seeds for what became his spiritual school, of which the Enneagram was a very small part, but an important part because it identified what was in the way of you seeing yourself accurately and creating the changes that you perceived you needed. Because there's always one part of the ego that says, yeah, I want to not eat chocolate because I get a headache. That's me. And it's so true. But boy, I have so many positive limbic memories of those little Hostess chocolate cupcakes. And I think, yeah, that's what I want. Now you can just have them delivered to your house. You don't even have to drive to buy them. And so I think, oh, well, I don't want to have to pay someone to come regularly with the cupcakes. I'll just get several at once. I'll get 2. And then the next time, well, I should get a whole box. But then what happens because of the excessive part of 8, I just want to eat it.
To say.
And I'll say, okay, I'll just one more. And then I'll think, okay, I won't open another package.
Yeah.
Well, you know, maybe just one more, because I want the limbic smell, even though it's all artificial now, but they're pretty good at reproducing the smell. Having said that, we all have those associations. It's just different for each of us. But the other part of my ego that said, Katherine, don't eat chocolate because you're going to get a headache in a few minutes. How is that worth it? But the reward of, oh, we were all happy when we got those little Hostess cupcakes because we were never allowed to have sweets. So when we got them, or we took our allowance and immediately rode to Speedy Mart, but now it'd be 7-Eleven, and get a frozen drink, licorice, bubble gum, and the Hostess cupcakes. Reminds me of my brothers and I doing that. So it's a very positive memory. So now I want to open it up to the group. Any questions that you had? Because we have another 20 minutes. Does anyone have a question? Kai.
Yes, I have a question about what you said about twos needing to be two, 6, and 9s. 9s being the pleasant person, and 6 needs to be likable and the good neighbor and the buddy. I don't identify with my 6 being the likable, good neighbor and buddy kind of thing. Is it because of my Tritype?
Well, I would say that you do care. If someone has a negative projection on you, I think it would really bother you, because it does most 6s, even if they just think that's a difficult neighbor. It still makes the 6 uncomfortable for someone to be projecting negativity onto them. So you may not see it, but I have found that 6s will use their humor to create rapport. Now, the 4-6-8 is the kind of intense type of each center. So when you have all 3 and you lead with 6, it is the most intense combination of all.
Yep.
So you would have an intense feeling that also can change. So you might like someone and think they're the best, and then they do something that you perceive as like undermining or negative, or a type of teasing that doesn't feel uplifting. And then you won't like that person. And then if they were nice again, or said, oh, wait, do you not like it when I tease you that way? Then the 6 will immediately like the person again. So the most important thing to understand about the 6 is they're always trying to create balance. And their intense reaction, especially of the 4, 6, 8, will change if that person is then nice and understanding. Now, if there's been a negative projection onto someone, because you perceive they're feeling a particular way because they're not responding to your jokes or your friendliness, and there's no other input, and you're maybe just talking to one friend or one spouse, or you're not talking to anyone, you can have a set opinion that's harder to break. So I would just invite you, Kai, to realize that there have been some people you really like and then you don't, or you go on and off. You think that the person is not supporting you, and then you can see them in a negative light. And then when you realize, oh, they weren't not supporting you. And this is key for a 6. You want to be supported. And that's like reassurance, validated for your projections, but they do oscillate.
Yeah, the key word is oscillating between the shifting loyalties, I guess.
Yes, yes, for sure.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Becca?
Hi, thank you. So I want to preface my question by saying that I think any 2 people of any tritype and instinctual stacking combination in terms of romantic relationships can have a successful relationship if they both love each other and are committed to each other. Okay, disclaimer out of the way. So I'm wondering, in terms of relationship compatibility, whether it's better for your partner to have the same dominant instinct as you, since the instincts dictate, our primary survival strategies, as well as our values, versus your partner having the same tritype, but a different dominant instinct. So for example, for me, like as a 6-2-1 with the social instinct, would I be better off if my partner was a 4-7-8, but also had a social instinct, even though the 4-7-8 is like wildly different than the 6-2-9, versus would I be better off with a 1-2-6, but had a different dominant instinct, either self-pres or sexual?
Well, I did research on the instincts with 2 other people. One that was a self-pres, she was a self-pres 1, and the other was a social 7, and then myself. We wanted to see, based on the different instincts, what we would relate to in others. And we did a whole event with the Helen Palmer graduates, the people that had attended at least 1 week of the trainings. And what became clear is that by far and away, if you have the same instinct with the same identification, that it's easier. But if you're the same instinct with a different definition of how that should be, so if you have 2 sexual subtypes or instinctual types, but one is identified with socially engaging with others and the other hates society and people, it's going to be a hurdle that you're going to have to navigate. But if you have something in common, it actually does make it easier to understand where that person might be coming from. So I gave the example of Spencer and myself, both having 8, both having 4, and then both being sexual. Those are a lot of things that make it easier for us to understand one another without additional explanations. Having said that, we still need to understand our differences as to what's important. Like, I thought I was reactive. until I met 4-6-8s. On the other hand, they're calling off something that my 7 might just smooth over. And we need both. So the true answer to that is the more things you have in common with the same identification, the easier it is and the less translation you need. But each person and each couple has a different idea of what's important. And the minute you can translate it using these tools and depersonalize what feels so personal, and that it could be intentional on the other person's part. Like if you have a 9, for example, their defense strategy is to narcotize. So they're going to do something when they're stressed. They're going to divert. They're going to do unimportant things because the important thing's really stressing them out. They may need to go to sleep. And people say, wait, I'm having this important conversation with you. Why are you falling asleep? And that could be personalized. I had that actual experience. But the fear of the 9 was that I was going to reject the 9. I was just directly saying, oh yeah, we need to talk sometime today. And the way it was interpreted is it was going to be bad news. But it wasn't. I just wanted to remember that there was something I wanted to say. So with the translation, I would never be offended by a 9 that's feeling stress and starting to like doze off, because that's how they manage stress. So I think it's the deep personalizing, and it depends on the Myers-Briggs type and the order of the types. So if you have 2 people that are sexual, but one identifies intimacy as going just the 2 of you somewhere where you can just talk for hours on end and let things unfold, and another sexual partner type says, no, I think intimacy is when we couple go together and are with our friends, and that when we're at a party, we stay together. Where one might say, wait a minute, I'm a sexual 8, I want to talk to everybody. And the other type, maybe a sexual 2, says, no, I want you to stay with me and we'll go experience everybody together so that after the fact, we can talk on a deeper level. So understanding that is important too. But you're right. Yeah, I mean, the question people always ask is which tritypes go together? And as I said at the beginning, there are some that are the same, but if you're the same, like if someone's the same type, tritype, instinctual stacking, and Myers-Briggs, then someone's got to cover the territory that the other isn't. So if you have 2 7s, neither one of them want to do the tedious job, but someone's got to. And that's just what we navigate in relationships, period. Anything you'd add to that, Spencer? Do you want to take Nancy's question?
I mean, yeah, I can add something really quick because I know we're short on time and I want to make sure we get as many people as we can. I would say as vague of an answer as this might come off, it depends what the individual person's seeking. Because if you have the same, they can kind of overstack, right? If you connect things to therapeutic phrasings, intimate types can like border like, you know, codependency, for example, because they build their life around their partner and they can really focus on partner needs and will prioritize partner over the other stuff first in order. If you're both intimates, you may unintentionally really lock in, and that, you know, too much of anything, not enough of anything could be bad. So I would more say the individual based on their needs, like man, I tend to blah blah blah, like I'm I definitely was one of those people that I think bordered codependency when I was earlier in dating. So I think it's actually really good that I'm married to a self-pres, because the amount of times that I had to go through, like we'd be in a conflict late at night, and then she's like, hey, how about we just go to bed? We could talk about this in the morning. And I'm thinking, how can we sleep at a time like this? Right. That kind of vibe. But what that showed me is, no, we can go to bed. We'll be okay. We can talk about it later. And of course, reactive me, some of my feelings go down and I'm a better communicator. And that actually helped me grow as a person because of the balance it created. So the only thing I would add is everything my mom said is totally true. But at the same time, if the person knows about themselves that they have a tendency towards blah, 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 balance could even really, really, really help grow the relationship. Because I guess your question was easiest. So yeah, the more you're aligned, that'd be the easiest. But you can grow by creating that balance as well. That was all I was going to add.
Absolutely. And depending on what the types are, because like 6 has a natural line to 9. 9 has a line to 6. So then the other variables become important. And everything's important. Commonality. What did you grow up with? What are you used to? What were your parents' types? I've shared many times that my dad said, hey, I've got 3 sons, but it's my daughter who gets the message. And the reason I got the message was simply that I was another 8 and my brothers weren't, but they have the imprinting of 8, but they don't have the fears and concerns of the 8. Of course, we don't think we have any fears or concerns other than when something we want is not playing out in the way we think would be fair and judicial and what's called for. But otherwise, we think, yeah, it doesn't matter to me. But actually, it does matter. It's the first thing I have to teach 8s. Yeah, actually, you do care. Your defense strategy of denial is telling you you don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, are you sure about that? And I said, yeah. And they go, oh, no, I don't worry about that. And as another 8, I can say, and other fairy tales, because that's what we tell ourselves until we know otherwise. Nancy?
I just wanted to ask about the test, and if anyone who has a 6 in their Tritype, are they going to automatically get the messages, the little asterisks?
Yeah.
So anybody who has 6. So I think one of them, isn't one worded something along the lines of not just your head type is likely to be a 6, but that your lead type is likely to be a 6. So I'm wondering if that's, how do you differentiate between somebody who is actually a 4-6-8 versus a 6-4-8 or an 8-4, any variation of those things?
That is such a great question, because when I decided to have that programmed in, all of them have not been programmed, but the really overt ones for the 6, but there are some for the 9 that are just important, but are harder to name because both 6 and 9 are consistently inconsistent. But what's different about the 2 is that the 9 will say, well, I can do that also, and I can do that. And they're adding on.
Mm-hmm.
And so they might have had a choice set up based on their own choices in the very beginning. Let me go back and say what most people don't realize is how complex this test is. I gave you 3 Enneacards for each Enneagram type. And you had to choose which Enneacard you put at the top, in the middle, and the bottom. Then later, the cards are served to you according to your choices. So there is a pattern for the test of having options. But let's say you had to choose between 3, 7, and 8 at the very beginning of the test. Well, it's going to be your top 3 card, your top 7 card, and your top 8 card. For another person, they could have chosen something altogether different. So if you think about it mathematically, already there's a huge distinction. So even though it might say you tested as a 378, but are you going to have the same cards as someone else? No, it's very important to know which cards, which is why I have the option on the left to click on the Tritype so you can see which cards you chose. And if you want to see when you had the choice point, you go to the show answers because it's really, really important. Now, is there someone that's not a 6 that will have a lot of asterisks? Yes, if they have 9 and 6 in the Tritype, they might lead with another type. Or it can be a 9, but it will be the 9 with that's more doubting because of the 6 in the Tritype. But because they're adding, you can do that too. So if they're given the playoff between their own cards as to what's at the top and their second choice, then they reorder it one time, and then later in the test, because of their choices, those two come up again and you choose the opposite one, the computer picks that up automatically as consistently inconsistent. So it knows you're 6 or a 9. Now, some people just don't know themselves well enough, and they can have a bunch of different answers. But there are 4 ways that I'm doing that with the Enneacards, and then 2 ways I'm doing that with written sentences. So it's evaluating all of them. Every time you were given the 3, what order did you put them in? And one significant piece is that some people test better with the pictures and the words, and others with the phrases. And what we want to see is how many times you had a different top choice. So if you had 3 or more top choices, like in one stacking of your first choice cards, you had the 3, and then in the stacking column right next to it, you had 7. And then in the Tritype, your first stacking was 4, and then your second stacking was 3. Now you have 1 4 card, 1 7 card, and 2 3 cards. And then when I asked you the questions, if you then had another type as dominant, then already you're a 6 or a 9 because you're also trying to have balance. You're very much trying to balance things out. But whereas the 9 is adding, I can do that, and they're nonchalant about it. The 6 is saying, well, I'm not that, and I'm not that. Well, wait, what is the test doing? Yeah, I'm this too sometimes, depends on the situation. Then they're going to have a similar testing pattern. But what's helpful to understand is they're going to struggle with all testing instruments because the same pattern plays out. Now, if it's an instrument where you're ranking on a 5-point system, meaning 5 the most obvious or most true of you, and 1 the least true of you, you get the 6s and 9s where they'll choose the middle line a lot. So I have to deliberately leave that out, or the 6s and 9s won't differentiate. But it does help in the process of the session to clarify that by defining the adjectives. Spencer, anything you'd add?
I mean, I was just going to have a simple answer. It's not really, it's not incredibly consistent because we can be inaccurate about what order people are doing. But I would just encourage people to think of think, feel, act. So your heart types are going to feel, your head types are going to think, your gut types are going to act. So if you're curious what order someone is, what do they do? I know I personally act, then feel, then think about if I should have done it that way. 8 4 6. So it's not a slam dunk because the person could be, they might not identify with the order you think they do things in. But if you want to know the actual order, that can be a very easy shortcut if answered correctly. What do you do first? Think, feel, act. What do you do second? What do you do third? That's going to identify the order of the centers and therefore the order of your tritype.
And the only time it's complicated is if someone has a 6 or a 9, because the 6 doesn't realize that they're hesitating, and that's thinking. But they may notice that they'll go into reaction, so they might think they act first, or they could have an emotional reaction to what's happening. So they could think that they feel first. But as the observer, you're going to notice if they hesitate for a second and go look at the scenario before they answer that question. And then with the 9, they're determining if they're going to act or not act, move, not move. So they might think that they're thinking or feeling when actually they're in kind of a position of inaction. So it doesn't seem like they're acting. But other than those 2 variables, which are important since most people are 3, 6, 9, it's the most common tritype. And then the other combinations are having a hexad type, the 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, and 7, which are just the wings of the 3, 6, and 9. So it gives that individuality. But yeah, it's really think, feel, act, think, feel. Spencer acts, then feels, then thinks, whereas I act and I think about it and I go, wait, I guess I was feeling that. But feeling comes third for me. I'm also the T in Myers-Briggs and he's the F. So I have noticed a pattern with that for what it's worth.
Mhm.
Kim? Oh, did I answer everything, Nancy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
Hi, Katherine.
Hello.
Hi. So I had a consult with you recently about my tritype, and that led me to realize that my understanding of certain Enneagram types was flawed. Like, I don't think I understand 4s or 5s or 9s because I previously thought that I was getting all these 4, 5, 9s, but then you're telling me that you suspect that the group of clients that I'm getting are really 6s and 9s. And so immediately I started testing everyone who was coming on board. And I noticed that the clients whose MBTI begin with ES, extroverted, sensing, when they take your test, they seem, it seems accurate. But when I give it to my other clients who are introverted intuitives, like INFJ, INFP, INTJ, when they take your test, they're getting results that I don't agree with. Like when they get this, like for example, I recently referred a client to you, and for the past, 3 or 4, at least 4 years, she had been taking this tritype test, and I don't know if it's yours or someone else's, but she told me she kept getting 3, 5, 8, which is what I kept getting all these years. And then when I spoke with you and I mentioned to her that I got a 3, 6, 8, then she took it right away. And within an hour, she said she got a 3, 6, 8. And we were chatting. I was in a small group chatting with some other clients, and I was talking about something else. But within less than 40 minutes, she I mean, your test is pretty long and it requires focus. So I don't know how she quickly took the test and then suddenly got, no, because when I took your test, I take it with deliberation. I actually focus and read it, and it takes me a while. I don't try to skip through and breeze through it. I take it with intent, deliberation. But I was chatting with her and another client asking for like if they could send me some Japanese cosmetics or something to ship it from their country. And anyway, while we were chatting about that, she went and took your test, and said she got a 368, and I was shocked because it felt like she was tracking me, like she was answering the test based on what she thought I would answer it as. You know, I knew she couldn't be my type because I don't think someone who is my type would get coaching from me. You know what I'm saying? Like, what could my type learn from me? You know what I'm saying?
A lot if they're the same. But here's
Sure.
the question. Was she trying to match you when you said you were the 358? Or when you said you were the 368? And she might be altogether different. So what is important is, are we defining the types in the same way?
Well, that's
And-
the thing. So I thought it was weird that she kept getting, like, when I was getting 358 years ago, up until the point that I met you, she got that. But then as soon as I notified her that I was a 368, then she went and took it. And I don't know why she felt the need to go take it again. But then when she took it, she matched my result. But anyway, so she was supposed to get coaching on me for this particular other case, this other person. But then I told her, you know, to go ahead and maybe book with you and get typed by you, because I'm not an expert on, I mean, I've been giving out your test. I've been giving out another test, and I just kind of been eyeballing it using another test, but I was not using your test. And she went and took the test, and she kept saying to me that she got 358, but then after she booked with you, she said you typed her as a 369, which is a totally different type. And I'm even skeptical of a 3. I mean, I believe she has a 69. And I believe you when you tell me that you suspect that all of my girls have a
I don't think all. I never do all.
okay.
So
So
it was your description of the types. And I
Yeah.
said that's usually a 6 or 9.
right. So I believe that, let's say this particular group has a 6+9, but she said you typed her as a 369, and I asked her, well, what's your main core type? And she said 3. And I just don't see the 3, because to me, she's so withdrawn. I don't see any, like, I consider, like, I have another client who's an ESTJ 369, and I believe it. I see the 3, like, it's just, but anyway, I'm just mentioning this to you because my gut is tracking inconsistencies, and it bothers me when I see,
And that's 6, by the way, rather than 8.
really.
That's usually lead 6. Yeah, because it's really important to the 6 to figure out what those inconsistencies are. Whereas the 8 just thinks, yeah, that's an inconsistency, and there's no additional attention going to it.
But this problem is, I'm trying to figure, are these girls lying to themselves? Because if I'm giving out your test to everyone and they're taking it, do I accept it? Because when certain clients take it, and another one took it too, the one who you said she might be a 926, she got 369. So
From me or from the test?
from the test.
The test isn't enough. It needs to be checked. And that's why I said you need to look at what was in the blue banner and then look at how they made their decisions in the Enneaspread part. Because you'll begin to recognize what's incongruent, and then you must look at the adjectives they chose.
Yes. So maybe I need to get with you and learn how to.
So what is your question then?
My question is, I don't know what to do when so I believe your test has merit, but then I have clients who are taking your test and I don't believe their results. I don't believe the input that they're giving me. So I'm skeptical of their results. So when these two clients, there's 2 of them, there's the INTJ and there's the INFP, and both INFP and INFJ are coming out with 369 with lead 3. I'm like, no, my body is saying, you're not a 3. You're not. I mean, I believe they're a 6/9, but not a 3, and not in anyway. So I don't want to accuse my clients of lying and say they're lying to
Well,
themselves.
they might not be aware of it either, because these are identifications. And when people identify with something, it's very hard to have them see another perspective unless you can ask the question that determines if it's coming from the head, heart, or gut. That helps a lot. And then the lookalikes. But it's not whether a test is right or wrong, because my first Enneacard tests, I just used 5 adjectives and only one set of cards, actually, and then a second set for the Tritype. But now I use 3, and they're having to do a lot more organizing. So I've had people say, oh, your first test was right. I came out as a 5. And now I'm skeptical of your new test, and it's wrong. But to even use the word skeptical is what 6s use. So you have to listen to the vocabulary, like I'm listening to yours, as you're saying. Now, the ESTJ is really strong, as I mentioned earlier. So it can make it harder to determine. But what is causing you stress is whether you can believe them or not, whether you can trust them or the test, or whether they're lying or not. And these are the concerns of type 6.
So I'm certain that they're not what they say the test, what they're inputting in the test. And I believe they're picking what they perceive.
A lot of people do.
Yeah, that's
So-
what we all do.
So that's why I'm having a difficult time, like trying to reconcile my because I know my clients, I know them very well, and I'm listening to them and I'm connected to them. And it's like they have a fantasy persona of what they think they are. Like they think they're a 3, and I'm like, you're not a 3. Like, and it's not that I'm skeptical, I'm certain they're not a 3. I'm certain they're not.
But if your definition of 3 is the self-promoting, assertive 3, that's goal, 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 you're going to miss the anti-vanity 3 that is like downplaying that, but they're weaving in their significance. Because remember, 369 is the most common, so there are a lot more 3s out there than people realize. But if they're the sexual 3, they're going to become the ideal person. And if they've decided that you're the ideal because you're the coach, they're going to try and match you exactly. And if they're a 6 and they feel safer if you're the same, they're going to match you, or they're going to think you're like them. Like every time Spencer's brother came home and he met someone new, he'd say, hey, Mom, I've met someone just like me. They're a 6 the way I am, but actually they could be any Enneagram type, but he was seeing what was similar. And that's what a lot of 6s can do. And then 9s merge with the person of their choice. And then they only counter merge in a conflict. And then the person saying, wait a minute, we matched. We're not matching now. But what I'm hearing you say is that you want to be able to trust them or the test,
Yes.
or your evaluation.
Yes. So there's your test, there's what their perception, and then there's my perception. So we've got 3 different things going on, and it's just all over the place. Like I have my own perception of them, they have their own perception, and then there's your test, you know, and we each, me and my client, we have our own interpretation of your test. So it's all about interpretation. And there's this dissonance, and I'm not okay with all this dissonance. You know, like even I'm not fully well versed in your material, so I need to, you know, get more
Right.
That's the
training
best way to go,
on that.
is to
Yeah.
know how to interpret the test or what
Right.
questions to ask. Spence?
Yeah, I would say combine all 3. As someone who has 8 and 6, I also have a tendency to not only question, but challenge. And so it's one of those things to remember. And trust me, as someone who also leads with 8, can I say, if I feel it in my gut that blah, 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 I'm going to push that. I'm not always right. I don't know your inner world. I don't know what's motivating you. I'm only going off of what you've said and how I've internalized your behaviors and your mannerisms. So the thing to really understand is if you're seeing a cog in the wheel, all right, I'm seeing 2 out of 3 of these numbers, but this one doesn't make sense to me. Just ask trap questions, right? Ask questions that would separate one number from another. Both 2s and 3s and 4s want affirmations, but in what area? They're all focused on image, but what kind of image do they want? So like, oh, okay, so when it comes to like, if you're at a job and blah, 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 like, what would it matter? What would really mean a lot to you if the boss pointed this out to you? Right? Because there's all an image they're trying to live up to. There's all a feedback they're trying to get. Get them to either prove your perceptions correct or to give you more information you didn't have previously.
Yeah.
Because my guess is the truth is somewhere in the middle. You're picking up on blah, blah, blah. And remember, behaviors, those are the snake in the grass. We have no idea why someone's behaving a certain way.
So it's
So
not
we have to be like, what's your inner world that's driving this behavior? And not to mention, if we see our own type in someone else and we don't recognize it, we call out falsehood when we have 8 and 6. And what I've heard you refer to over and over and over again is they're not a 3, they're not a 3, they're not a 3.
They're
That's
not a
number-
this or they're not a that.
But I've heard 3 specifically, and 3's in your tritype. So if you don't connect to that type of 3, which 3s will show up differently based on what the other 2 numbers are, just like any of the other 8 numbers.
MBTI.
Right, and that too. So my guess is it's also like that doesn't feel right, because remember the 8 and 6, that combination is very much like, I'm going to question that and also directly challenge it. That's what that combo does.
yes, I
Truth
feel
comes out when you do that.
Yeah.
It's the
But put 3 with a
perception.
different number, 3 looks different. So
I'm
it's
very confrontational, but I try to like not be so like
ask trap questions. I would really recommend that. And if you're curious on how to get these trap
Questions of discernment, not trap.
Sure.
Well, they are trap questions,
Yeah.
but they reveal, people have to use their own vocabulary.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Basically try not to lead the
that's
witness,
all.
because I've been guilty of that when I was first learning how to do this. So instead of leading the witness and guiding them towards where he thinks, be like, okay, ask a vague question that would identify one of the 3.
okay. So are you saying when you say trap question, is it yes or no, or is it
No, open-ended.
never
Open-ended.
yes or no.
Never yes or no. Because
So
that's a leading question
okay, so don't
accidentally.
give her no choice. Just
You make him give a paragraph. That's
Yeah.
why I said if you did well at work, what would you want your boss to reflect back to you, for example?
okay.
Right? Boss is usually someone who we want to live up to an expectation that's going to hit all 3 image types. But what are they going to point out? Are they going to want that the boss recognized they not only got the job done, but they did it in this like unique way? But is it more like, hey, like I love your efficiency and that you're so on top of it, and I can always depend on you to be the example, blah, 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 3. You're so helpful and the way that you like build up others and like blah, 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 2. Like, what do they want to be recognized for? Right. And that's just heart types, right? You know, like I would say, how do you handle your anger if it's a gut type? How do you deal with anxiety and what's your thinking process if it's a head type? So whatever center you're trying to discern, as my mom would say, I was using trap, I think discern's a better word. Help, like get them to help you, because maybe you don't know all the info, or maybe they're wrong. It happens all the time.
So instead of relying solely on the test results, I did buy your mom's Ennea style book where you're learning the lexicon. So I just want to hear the way they describe themselves, what words they use,
Sure,
adjectives, their language.
And the way they fill out the questionnaire, because
Yes.
we may think of ourselves many different ways, but what are we going to put as those 5 words? Like I'll later say, well, yeah, I'm like that. And other people will say that, which is why it's the one place on the test until that part was broken where you couldn't go backwards. Because once you filled out the Ennea style questions, they're open-ended. Then it goes on to the Enneacards. And what would happen invariably is people would say, oh, wait, that word on that card is more what I am. And they'd want to go back and change the adjective. But what's critical is what they say first. And
I looked at that first. To me, that was the most valuable part of the test, was the the Ennea style questions, how they describe themselves in their own words. That was the most valuable to me.
But
Because
here's a really important piece to that, is that they'll be using adjectives that only an adult uses. And the question is, what was true of you most of your life, most of the time? So when you see those 5 adjectives, you need their definition. And if it's really kind of advanced vocabulary, you ask them, well, what word would you have used when you were 10 years old? And then they're going to have to reveal another part of themselves. And they might say, oh, well, I used to be really cautious, but I'm not now. And usually with a 6, they go through puberty and they're less cautious and they're more confident. But until you ask them what like if they say they're brave, well, the type that says brave has 6 in the tritype. It doesn't have to be the lead, but 6 is in there. So when you go to the page in Ennea style that has just the chart as the most common words used by each type, you look at that first, and then you can go to the individual page to see if they used more of those words. But they were based, I think the last time that was changed was after about 1,000 people. And what I found is they were just variations on theme, but the choices were the same, maybe a little more finesse, but look at all the words on the Ennea style questionnaire. So in answer to your dilemma is you need to know more about their definition of the words and make sure it's not your definition of the word. And then do the inquiry process where you're saying, okay, after they give you their definition, then say, now just blurt and see. And if they said they were kind, then you say, all right, and what would happen if you're not kind? And they might say, oh, well, I'm never not kind. Well, go to the crazy idea and imagine that you were kind, were unkind. And then they'll say something. And whatever they say, well, then I wouldn't be a nice person. And if you're not a nice person, then they might say, well, then I wouldn't be liked. And if you're not liked, don't let them go into explanation at that point. They got to define their adjective from the very beginning, their definition of kind, a kind person. But then you keep going until they get to, well, then I'd be dead. And if you're dead, you keep going. Because for some people, if they're dead, they have a fear of not being remembered. Other people, if they're dead, well, they'd be sad. And even though they know, well, I know I'd be dead, but I'd be sad, or I didn't fulfill my purpose. People go different places, and you need to keep going until they say the same thing 3 times.
I noticed there's a lot of 6s and 8s here, and you kept saying while we were talking that both of you kept saying that I'm a 6, and I'm wondering if I'm really a counterphobic 6.
Yeah.
More than
With 8 in the tritype.
Yeah. And ESTJ. The 863 is the most single-minded, assertive person on the Enneagram. And then ESTJ just amplifies that. By far and away, everyone would think you're an 8, but you're not using the 8 vocabulary, which means you're not using the defense strategy of 8. In other words, 8 wouldn't ask a question about whether the test is right or their sensing is right, or if the person's lying to them. Those are the fears of the 6. But the counterphobic 6 is going to go right into action, but it's defensive. It's preemptively having the defense in case what you're projecting onto that person is correct. So if you think they're lying, then you're going to want to prove it. And if
I don't think they're intentionally lying. but I'm seeing an inconsistency. I don't trust.
Yeah, these are all the issues of 6.
There's no blind trust.
Well, that
No.
doesn't exist in 6.
I have to check. I'm checking. I'm
That's
checking and I'm tracking right now with these types of girls that I'm dealing with. And I'm only this way with them. I'm not this way with anybody else. It's just because they're my clients and they're having it. So anyway, I'm this way with them and only with them. It's heightened with this type.
but if an 8, well, an 8 wouldn't ask that question, to be honest with you, because an 8's going to believe their sense of things. They're not going to ever give power to a test. They're going to trust instead their sense, but they may want to go learn more about how to accurately evaluate something. But it's not the concern of the 8, because the 8 is in denial of their own lack of trust, or they expect everybody to be lying, whether they mean to or not. So they're just going to want to see, okay, what kind of lie is it? Are they aware, or are they trying to match me, or why? They're going to go into the details of it. But the 6 is going to keep repeating the same thing because it's very distressing on an unconscious level for 6 to not have the answer and know what to trust, who to trust, when to trust, and what the criteria is for trust. Because if you trust someone and you should have been skeptical, then you could be taken advantage of, lied to, manipulated, or fail in your relationship with them. And underneath it all, with 3 in the Tritype, you're going to want to succeed and quickly, because both your Tritype and your MBTI type want to do it fast.
Mhm.
And people love that are indecisive. If they have 9 or 6 in the Tritype, they're going to love having a coach that's confident.
Well, I rely on my own authority. I don't rely on them. I don't rely on them to even know what to ask me, because I already know these girls, they're so clueless that they don't even know what they need. They just know they need to talk to me, and I get to decide what they need. You know what I'm saying? So I don't even put, it's not that I don't trust
Now,
your,
I think I know what you're saying, but no, because if we're not in the person's shoes, we can only guesstimate what they're saying.
Mm.
But interestingly enough, again, the 6s say, you know what I mean, you know what I'm saying. But it's usually a head type that does that, not a gut type.
Mhm.
Because it's too visceral if you lead with the gut. But if you lead with a head type, you're going to think people have the same understanding that you do, because it's a head concept. And remember, the head type is focused on, what do I need to learn or know to be safe in the world? And who can teach me? Whereas the 5 as the head type is saying, yeah, what do I need to know? And let me go try a bunch of different things out on my own till I see, okay, I need to learn to fish. How am I going to catch a fish? And they're going to just try many, many different strategies till they find the one that works. Whereas the 7 is saying, wait, this guy knows how to fish. And they'll kind of invite themselves along. Hey, let's go fishing together. I'm sure we can give each other some tips or have a good time fishing. But it's a ploy for the 7 to learn what they want to learn without being one down from other people. And the 6 is saying, well, wait, does this person know more? Is this more important or that more important? So it's needing to see who has the best information, what is the best test. Now, some people give more than one test if they're a coach in any field. I'm just saying you need to give mine first so that they're not influenced by any of the words that other tests will reveal. And a lot of times when I'm working one-on-one with someone and I'm asking them to define one of their adjectives, they can't really do it. And they'll say, well, I don't really know. And I said, well, what made you decide to choose this word? Oh, my son said that. Or, gee, I asked my friend and they said this. Or I asked my husband and they said that. And that's immediately a 6 or a 9, because you're looking outside yourself for someone to tell you what's inside yourself.
A 6 or 9?
Yep. And remember that that information was not fully disseminated. So the strong ESTJ 6 was left out of the dissemination of the Enneagram.
Mm.
And you would have been made an 8. I would have made you an 8 38 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's only learning the full definition of the types that I altered. But then I would have wondered why the person was doubting or questioning or skeptical, because as an 8, I never questioned that. So now Spencer has 6 as his head type, so he's going to doubt more than I am. And it's a good means to an end. And 863 and 864 are the 2 most intense tritypes in any order. So yeah, I would explore that your questioning isn't just your ESTJ, but it's the 6 wanting to get the right information. And thank you, Spencer, for co-hosting these with me. And eventually, well, actually, we're in the process of creating a tritype book on relationships. So everything that you add is great. And Spencer will be putting little mini versions on YouTube once you set that up. Okay. All righty. Well, I'll see you in another quarter. In 3 or 4 months, Spencer and I will do it again. And if there are topics that are of interest to you, let us know. And that would be when you register, then you could say then. And I'll be putting it on the website, because I didn't always want to have to send out a newsletter. So you check the website if you want to know when it's going to be, because it'll be on there as well. All righty. Thank you. Thank you all. Good night. Or good morning, depending. Bye-bye.